This isn't a shelter, and we don't do walk-ins off the street, the manager said coldly, eyeing the man and child like they were dirt on the marble floor. You think just wearing a t-shirt and dragging in some little girl gets you a penthouse suite? She scoffed, then leaned across the counter. People like you don't belong here. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. And if this story moves you, don't forget to like and subscribe. Stories like this deserve to be seen and remembered. Now, let's take you inside the Azure Haven Hotel, a brand new luxury property right on Biscayne Boulevard in Miami. It's 1 p.m. on a blazing July afternoon. Sunlight cuts through the glass doors, dancing off polished marble floors and crystal chandeliers. The air inside is crisp and perfumed, the kind of setting where money and privilege whisper from every corner. And stepping into that space, James Carter, a tall black man in a plain white t-shirt and khaki shorts, walked in hand with his 9-year-old daughter, Zoe, dressed in a pink t-shirt, her tiny jean shorts creased from the car ride, curly hair pulled back into a neat ponytail. They looked, to the staff at least, like they didn't belong. But what no one knew, what the front desk clerks didn't pause long enough to even ask, was that James wasn't just any man off the street. He was the owner, the CEO of the entire Azure Hospitality Group, worth over $10 billion, the one who approved the architecture, the lighting, even the scent used in the lobby. But today, none of that mattered. Not to the staff. Not in this moment. James had come here undercover, responding personally to troubling reports on travel forums, anonymous stories of black guests being mistreated, talked down to, turned away. He didn't send a team. He didn't announce his arrival. He brought his daughter and tried to book a 3-day, 2-night VIP stay at his own hotel. No red carpet, just honesty. And from the moment he walked in, the judgment hit hard and fast. Linda Harper, the manager on duty, didn't even let him finish his sentence before shutting him down. You don't have a reservation? That's not how it works here. This isn't some roadside motel, she said, her voice sweetly condescending. Then came Michael Chen, a front desk clerk, who took one glance at James's black titanium card, scoffed, and threw it on the floor, letting it land by James's sneakers. Nice try, he said. These knockoffs get bolder every year. Zoe bent down to pick it up, but James stopped her. He picked it up himself, slowly, silently, his jaw tight. His daughter looked up at him, tears already brimming in her eyes. Daddy, she whispered, why are they so mean? He didn't answer. Not yet. He just stood there, fists clenched, heart racing, staring at people he paid, in a lobby he built, being treated like a stranger in his own house. Nearby, a guest, Evan Wright, a white travel blogger in his 30s, watched the scene unfold. He pulled out his phone and quietly began recording. Moments later, he tapped post on a short clip and wrote just 3 words, Racism at Azure Haven. He uploaded it to X. The video began spreading before the confrontation had even ended. Next to Michael, another clerk, Sarah Brooks, joined in with a smirk. We get these kinds of scams all the time, she said loudly enough for guests behind them to hear. They stroll in, try to act important, and expect free upgrades. Bet they Googled the hotel this morning. Then, under her breath but still audible, she added, they should try somewhere more appropriate, like one of those places off 79th. It was a jab drenched in microaggression, the kind James had endured too many times in too many places. But hearing it said in front of his child made something in him shift. Intern concierge Layla Morgan, just 22, stood behind the counter, visibly uncomfortable. She leaned forward and spoke to Linda in a hushed voice. I think that's a real card. And this man. Something's not right here. Linda didn't bother looking at her. Stay in your lane, intern. She snapped. You don't get to decide who we serve. By now, more guests were watching. Some whispered. A few turned their phones toward the scene. The tension in the lobby thickened. Then Thomas Reed, the hotel security guard, came over at Linda's signal. "You need to leave," he said to James. "You're making people uncomfortable." Zoe pulled closer to her father. "Daddy, I'm scared," she whispered. James inhaled slowly, calm, collected. He took out his phone and made a single call. "Nia," he said, speaking to his executive assistant. "Activate the internal system, quietly." On the other end, Nia Foster replied, "It's ready, sir. Say the word." James didn't say another word to the staff. Not yet. But his eyes, those told a story. Behind the frustration, behind the pain, was a storm building. "I promise you," James said evenly, his voice low but carrying. "You'll regret every word you've said today." Linda scoffed. "Threats won't get you a room." Zoe's small hand found his. "Why don't they like us?" she asked. Barely audible. Layla, now visibly upset, stepped out from behind the desk. "This isn't right," she said out loud. "He hasn't done anything wrong." Just then, Evan, the blogger, raised his phone. "It's already on X," he said flatly. "People are watching." Michael rolled his eyes and took James's card again. "Let me make this easy," he said. He walked over to the employee safe, opened the drawer, and locked the card inside. "We'll hold it until the authorities get here," he said. "Fraud's a serious matter." From across the room, Evan looked down at the card's details he had caught on video earlier and read aloud. "James Carter, Azure Hospitality Group." A murmur ran through the lobby. A few heads turned. One guest audibly gasped. James looked up, calm but deadly serious. "You just locked away the black card of the man who owns this hotel." And from that moment forward, the clock started ticking, not on James, but on them. Sarah, arms crossed and a smug look plastered across her face, leaned over the counter and mocked. "No VIP guests look like that," nodding toward James and Zoe as if they were a joke in a punchline. "Come on, sir," she added sarcastically. "You really thought we'd hand over a penthouse suite to someone dressed like you?" Her words cut sharp, loud enough for half the lobby to hear. James didn't flinch, but Zoe, her cheeks still wet from earlier tears, clung to her father's arm, her voice breaking as she cried, "Daddy, don't let them take us. I don't want to go." James's hand rested on her back as he shielded her with his body, still calm, but inside, something was breaking loose. Then Thomas Reed, the security guard, stepped forward, this time grabbing James's arm, not yanking, but firm enough to provoke. "Sir, we're going to have to escort you out now. You're disturbing the peace." That line, disturbing the peace. It echoed like an old wound James had heard too many times, in too many places, when his presence alone was treated as a threat. "Let go," he said slowly, his voice like steel. Thomas held his ground. "Then walk out with your own feet," he muttered. Zoe started crying harder, grabbing onto her dad's hand. The tension was drawing stares now. Other guests had stopped moving. The bellhop froze near the elevators. A couple clutching iced lattes whispered and pointed toward the front desk. "He's not doing anything wrong," a voice called out. Layla, the intern concierge, standing off to the side, her voice shaking but loud. "Their reservation is valid. I saw it on the screen before Linda cleared it." Michael turned to her, snapping. "You need to learn when to stay quiet." Linda shot Layla a deadly glare but said nothing. Instead, she whispered something into Thomas's ear, whatever it was. He nodded and took another step forward. Evan Wright, the travel blogger still live streaming, raised his voice from the center of the lobby. "This is what injustice looks like," he called out, pointing his phone straight at Thomas. Then Linda. "They're kicking out a black father and daughter because they think he looks too poor to be rich." Evan's voice carried across the polished floor, catching the ears of several guests who were now watching intently, some filming on their own devices. "He's not even raising his voice." One woman near the sofa said, "This feels wrong." Linda, clearly annoyed, barked, We don't need commentary from strangers. Sir, she snapped at James. Leave before I call the police. Zoe looked up at her dad with wide eyes. Daddy, what if they take you away? She whispered. And that was the final push. James reached for his phone again. Nia, he said clearly. Escalate it. On the other end, Nia Foster, his executive assistant, responded immediately. Already logging everything. Internal protocol is active. Just say the word when you want a full override. Almost there, James murmured. His eyes stayed on Linda. Keep digging, he said to her. You're going to hit something you can't handle. Linda smirked, unfazed. People like you always talk big. James stared at her. And people like you always think they're safe. Until the truth shows up. Sarah, still perched behind the desk, rolled her eyes dramatically and muttered. Troublemakers never know when to quit, Evan shouted over her. It's on Reddit now, too. 30,000 views and counting. Linda froze for a half second before composing herself. She turned to Michael and hissed. Say it's fraud. If anyone asks, tell them he forged that card. The little girl's not even registered. Say whatever you have to say. Michael nodded, visibly nervous now, but didn't look James in the eye. Layla, trembling, took a step closer toward James and Zoe. Sir, I believe you, she said quietly. And I don't want to work for people like this. Zoe looked up at her, sniffled, and whispered. Thank you. Then Layla turned to Linda and said out loud, You ignored complaints. I've seen the logs. People told you this was happening. That stopped the room cold. Linda turned slowly. You want to be fired? She asked Layla. You don't scare me, Layla replied, and for the first time, her voice didn't shake. James looked down at Zoe and then out at the guests now watching, some shocked, some quiet, all witnessing the same ugly thing unfold. I've spent my whole life proving people like this wrong, James said, voice firm but not angry. But I never thought I'd have to do it like this, in front of my own daughter. His words struck something in the room. A man near the elevators lowered his phone. A woman at the coffee bar looked down, visibly uncomfortable. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was heavy. Michael finally spoke, his voice uneven. Maybe we should let them explain. But Linda cut him off. No, we do not serve pretenders. Pretenders? James repeated. He stepped forward slowly. You're pretending this isn't racism in real time. Evan looked directly into his phone and said, If anyone out there still thinks this kind of thing doesn't happen, rewind the last 5 minutes. You're watching it now. Linda waved at Thomas again, more urgently. Remove them, she barked. Thomas hesitated this time, just slightly, but it was enough for a shift to happen. James turned to Zoe, bent down beside her. It's going to be okay, he whispered. They just don't know who we are yet. Zoe nodded, wiped her tears, and whispered, You're strong. Daddy. James stood back up, squared his shoulders, and looked Linda dead in the eyes. You just made this lobby a courtroom, he said. And I've brought the receipts. Linda stared at him, confused, defiant, but around her. Things were starting to crack. Layla stepped beside James. Evan stopped live streaming and began quietly uploading clips to his feed, and at least a dozen guests began murmuring about the posts. The truth was spreading, and fast. Linda's voice cut across the lobby like a knife. Thomas, I said remove them. Now. Her tone was no longer smug. It was sharp, panicked, cracking under pressure. But Thomas hesitated again, eyes darting between James, Zoe, the growing circle of guests, and Evan's phone still glowing with a recording icon. The moment was slipping out of their control, and Linda knew it. She stormed around the counter and stabbed her finger toward the exit. You and your daughter need to leave this property before I call the police and report you both for fraud and trespassing. That was the trigger. Guests nearby stopped pretending to ignore what was happening. One